All right. Here it is. Julie C. Mike Davis, what's up?
How's it going?
Man, I'm doing good. I don't know if you guys can see me backstage. I was, what I'm saying, the music always gets me right ready. Oh man. And we have a backstage here. It was like a virtual green room, and so we had the Seahawks game playing for everybody in the green room. I see some people, they was logging on the last minute, but we had the game in here playing for them. But it looks like hopefully the Hawks have pulled out. So I appreciate everybody joining us with Hawks games still in session, especially you, Mike Davis. You know what I'm saying? I know how much you love these Hawks.
Yes. But this is important, man. We really need to have this conversation. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, no doubt. How are you, Julie?
I'm doing very well. I'm really eager to get into this. You know, the internet's been pretty lit since we got that news of the Sean Kemp cannabis store.
The Sean Kemp cannabis story. That's what it is. So tonight we're having a conversation about the state of things in the cannabis industry and basically in the Black community. And I mean, we've really got an all-star lineup who are all gracious enough to join us really, literally last minute. A lot of these guys have just reached out right away and they made time for us this evening. Tonight, we're joined by Aaron Bossett, who co-founder of the Black Cannabis Commission, Key Porter, a cannabis advocate and co-owner of the Greenhouse, Ian Eisenberg, people might know his business, Uncle Ike's, Joy Hollingsworth, who's director of operations at Hollingsworth Cannabis and Hemp Company, Breon Corbray, founder and host of 2OG Smoking Weed, Coffee and Blunt Session. It's a podcast, and he's actually got quite a history here in the industry. And Christopher King, we can't do this show without a lawyer. All things you guys say might be held against you, so be careful. Christopher King is investigating civil rights and has actually got a few lawsuits that are going on and everything else. What kind of brought us to this conversation is, I think everybody last week it was big news. It was like, yo, man, Sean Kemp is opening a dispensary, and I think that if the conversation probably stayed right there, because it could have, it's the Rain Man. Seattle loves Sean Kemp. You know what I'm saying? And I remember as a kid, Sean Kemp, man, real active. You'd see him. He was one of the NBA players you'd see on the turf. Sean Kemp would be in the CD. Him and Gary Payton go get his haircut up there on 23rd. So it's almost like that was just enough to be like, hey, man, Sean Kemp's opening a dispensary, and the whole town would be like, yeah, we're with it, right there. I don't smoke, but you know what I'm saying, or indulge. Some of you guys clearly do. But to me, that would have been enough. Like, hey, former NBA All-Star and Sonic Sean Kemp opens up dispensary. Man, fantastic. But when it came out in the tagline, first Black owned, and everybody's ears popped up, like everybody. At least the people, like I know in Black media, the Black media space, people's ears really popped up because it's like, man, we've kind of heard this before. You know what I'm saying? Is it Sean? Is it really not Sean? I just got some images right here because when this came, we saw it on Twitter. Look, this is Yahoo News, cannabis business executive, Afrotech. Vlad TV, the Tacoma News Tribune. and of course the Seattle Times. Everybody's like, man, this is the first black owned. So, for us kind of seeing this story before, everybody's ears went up. It was like, well, does he own it, or is he the front man or anything else? And the reason why, and people watch Converge, a lot of people watch Converge to learn about our experience here and what we're going through, because a lot of times what we've seen is people are just the front man, and I think people were really wanting Sean Kemp to be like real ownership in it, as in go through licensing, name on license, and some of everything else. We're kind of finding out that might not necessarily be the case. Any thoughts on that, Mike?
Oh, definitely, man. Definitely, because when I first heard the news, I went straight into celebration mode. And I had that little part in the back of my head, but I shut that down. I'm like, yo, Sean Kemp, he's going to open it. GP's going to be here. And then I think I watched the morning show, and you and Trey brought in that skepticism, like, shoot, can we see the licenses before? And then I went and I started doing my own research, and then I seen who he was partnering with, and they had like multiple pot shops. They were all white owned, and like, you definitely killed my spirits on that one. But I do think that it was disingenuous for them to brand it like that, because it did get a lot of us excited. And I mean, it was a matter of days before people on Twitter came out with the real information that I think he had like a 10% stake just in exchange for his likeness and his image. And that's far from ownership.
What did you think when you first heard the news about this, Julie?
I mean, I think just like the rest of y'all, was exciting news, but it was almost immediate, the reactions online. We had a lot of community advocates online who have been doing the equity work for the cannabis industry for a minute, who were very quick to sort of correct and delineate the difference between, okay, this doesn't seem true. One of the statistics I've heard is like 1% of the licensed cannabis dispensaries in the country are owned by Black people. So I'm really eager to get into this conversation, but also interested to see, whether or not this headline and the, little glimmer of truth in the distruth can really propel this issue of cannabis equity more into the public light. I think there's an opportunity in that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And well, a few things real quick, Mike. It's unfortunate to know that I was a killjoy for you. The morning show, we'd like to try to bring people lots of, saying uplift. You're like, man, do water on it, everything else. Here's what caught me though, and really I started making phone calls. It's one line in here in this press release that they put out that caught my attention. And it says, I hope that Sean Kemp's cannabis will be an inspiration for people to get involved with the legal cannabis industry, especially people of color. And why my ears went up on that is for the last almost 3 years now, I've been interviewing people of color who've been in the cannabis industry. So it's almost like, reading it, someone who doesn't know would be like, oh, wow, there are no Black people or people of color trying to get in cannabis. Hopefully Sean Kemp will inspire them. And so when I read that part of the release, I'm like, well, man, there's already hella people who are trying to get in. So before we jump right into this as well, and we're gonna talk to Chris King here in a little bit, but I just want to bring this up on screen and we'll start our first segment here. This was what Chris King had put out, and he would just put it out there. Sean Kemp Cannabis is not Black owned and does not fix Washington State Liquor Control Board. Like, man, people start writing articles and everything right away. It's like, this is something that we definitely have to discuss. So here's how we're doing it tonight. So we got 4 segments altogether. The first segment is, what is the current state of the cannabis industry in Washington State? The second is, where do Black people currently fit into the cannabis industry in Washington State? Maybe there's some successes, some failures. Third segment, Chris King is going to give us some insight into, Chris King and Brion are going to give some insights into the lawsuits and legal action. And number 4, what changes need to occur systematically for there to be equal access for Black people in the cannabis industry in Washington State. So we got some real heavy topics going on. So the way that this is actually going to work is that I'm going to introduce our panelists one by one, and they're going to have about 3 minutes to answer that first main question. So the first main question is, what is the current state of cannabis industry in Washington State? We're going to get a bunch of different perspectives because we got a bunch of different people here. And once they go through there, we're going to open it up for question and answer. And my esteemed colleagues, Mike Davis and Julie C., will move forward with the question and answer. All right, you guys got it?
Got it.
All right, it's cool. I can see you in the back stage. Everybody back there, you got it. It's a nice beard you got, AB. It's looking long, man. All right. So, and as a matter of fact, you're up first, Mr. Bossett. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're going to how are we gonna do this? Let's just bring you in right now. Yeah. Hey, AB.
Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me. My headphones died, you guys. Sorry about that.
No, we can hear you good. So Aaron Bossett, community member and co-founder of the Black Cannabis Commission, and a lot of stuff. I know you guys do quite a few things, but you're active in shaping cannabis policy on the state level. Aaron Bossett, take a few minutes here and tell us, what is the current state of the cannabis industry in Washington State to you?
Current state of cannabis industry in the state of Washington to me looks something like a mafia, a racket. You got to kiss the ring at the dawn to get in. If it's true that, Sean Kemp couldn't get his license because of what the LCB has done, doesn't that kind of exemplify what the LCB has been doing in order to keep Black people out? The press release that you equated to, states, like you said, that Black people haven't been trying to get in. I myself have been fighting to get several people in and have not seen anything. And we are locked out of an essential business at this point, and a lot of people in the Black community are just doing their own thing away from policy and licensing, and that's not really a safe thing for them. But whatever alternative they have, excuse me, you guys, created by the state and their laws and policies. So, to me, it's kind of it's a tough thing right now. Cannabis in the Black community, I say.
All right. Let's shift it over now to Keith Porter. Hey, Keith Porter, what's happening?
Hey, everybody.
Hey. So, Keith Porter, same question to you from your perspective. 7+ years of advocacy work, and also this is real interesting here. It says that you're the owner and operator of a cannabis-friendly bed and breakfast, the Greenhouse, which provides a safe space for BIPOC communities to learn and experience the recreational and medical benefits of cannabis and hemp during a stay in Seattle. Does somebody have to be visiting Seattle to stay there?
No, anybody that's like interested in experiencing, come through.
All right. So let me throw this out to you. From your perspective, what is the current state of the cannabis industry in the state of Washington?
I think the current state of cannabis right now, in Seattle specifically, is we have now in this era deemed cannabis to be an essential business. And I think for that, we've definitely been in a state of where we're trying to find innovative ways for people to get accessibility to cannabis, and not just as a consumer, but also as stakeholders and owners. And I think a lot of those communities are BIPOC communities, and especially those that are Black. They're trying to definitely get a foot and a stake into the cannabis industry. And I guess the new wave that's coming up now is social equity and conversations around social equity. But I believe that our community deserves and wants more than just like partial ownership or percentages in the industry. We want an opportunity to have 100%. So I think Seattle is super progressive when it comes to cannabis and accessibility and the products and the services that we do serve. But I think that it's not inclusive, and our conversation should be more shaped towards that inclusion now, so we can expand what we can do in cannabis to more than just a specific community.
All right. Let's see here. Who do we have next on the list? We have Ian Eisenberg, and some people, this might be their first time even knowing it's Ian Eisenberg. A lot of people know your brand, Uncle Ike's, and Ian is the founder of Uncle Ike's. Uncle Ike's, Central District Bakes cannabis chain with 5 stores in the Seattle area. I bumped into you the other day when we were shooting the morning show over at the Liberty Bank building. and said to you then, like, man, you know what? People have a lot of questions. Will you come on air? And you said to me then, just give me a call. And this came up and I gave you a call. And so here you are. And Ian, let me throw this first question out to you. What is the current state of the cannabis industry in Washington State?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think it's important that you have this topic because right now a lot of people are getting all their information from social media about the state of cannabis or how cannabis licensing works or Kemp's cannabis, and it's just a lot of gossip and rumors. So it's good that you're addressing this. But I agree with a lot of what Aaron and Key had to say. The cannabis market in Washington State and Seattle is probably not what a lot of people thought it was going to be when they got into it. The margins have been constricting pretty quickly. It's a very, very competitive space, and it's not vertically integrated like in every other state of the country. And that's created this hyper competitive market, especially in Seattle, because Seattle has so many pot stores compared to other cities around the state that it's just price, price, price. And if you're not well funded, I don't think you're going to get into the market or do well. And that's probably the most important topic for this discussion, really, is access to capital. And that's what's keeping people out. And that's probably true in all business, but in cannabis, it's probably even more so, just because traditional lending institutions like banks don't lend to cannabis. So unless you have money from previous businesses or friends and family, you're immediately at a disadvantage.
All right. Moving right along here. Next up, we have Joy and Pain. All right, here we go. Joy Hollingsworth. Joy Hollingsworth is Director of Operations, Hollingsworth Cannabis and Hemp Company. The Hollingsworth Cannabis and Hemp Company is a family-owned and operated Tier 3, and I think you can probably tell people what Tier 3 means, producer processor located in Shelton, Washington. Established in 2013, we pride ourselves on small batch cannabis and a low carbon footprint. So Joy, you're growing the goods.
We are, and I want to give you a shout out. I got one of your sweatshirts here. It's my favorite. I don't have it on because my heat is real high, so I couldn't be on sweating it up. But Joy Hollingsworth from Hollingsworth Cannabis Company. We were established in 2013. So we're a producer processor. There are different tiers in the cannabis industry. We're a Tier 3, so that's one of the largest that you can be, which is 30,000 square feet. So we grow, produce, process from start to finish, seed to sale. We are selling directly to retail stores. Right now, we're primarily wholesale. But the state of the cannabis industry, when we got into this industry established in 2013, first licensed in 2014, we came into the industry with a small amount of people that were able to make that leap from medical to recreational wise. And there was a lot of barriers in that, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well. And we've seen a lot of those people who look like us, they have been displaced by the industry for commercialization and, big business wise. And we had, there's a small amount, 1% of ownership in the industry. And we're not talking about those people that you see that, might be security guards or might be twirling the signs or selling the cannabis. We're talking about majority ownership, 51%. There's less than 1% of that right now. And so what you're seeing right now is you're seeing this push for social equity. You're seeing a push for restorative justice. You're just seeing this big push for Black business, Black ownership, because we know that wealth transfers. And that's the biggest thing that you'll hear from a lot of people is they want to build generational wealth. How do we do that? Through land ownership and through small business. And they want to get, into the cannabis industry.
All right. Thank you, Joy. And next up, we have Brion. Brion, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm all right. Brion is the founder and host of Two OGs Smoking Weed, Coffee and Blunt Session, and also the owner of the Game Dispensary. Also says you're an activist and the inventor of the RX1 Factor Jump Box Home Resistance Training Platform. Hey man, you gotta put it all out there when you can. I ain't mad at you. You know what I'm saying? Any other businesses we need to promote? For a few minutes here for you, Brion, what is the current state of the cannabis industry in Washington State from your perspective?
Well, I just think it's well. I mean, for white folks, it's great. The people that own it, that are in it, it's great. But for African Americans, it's dismal. Um, there was a real push, a real plan to, um, so that it would be like this, right? And so this is what they wanted. They didn't want us to be included in this, and it has made a situation where now, we're out here fighting and, with these people over, being fairly treated just to be able to create generational wealth for our families. And those of us like me that were in it back in 2010, they ex-nate us out. They try to erase us off the history platform, and so they don't want Black people to be involved in this business. They would rather make the money on the other end off of us. So it's a pretty bad situation.
All right. So here's what we're gonna do here. We've heard from our segment one. They've kind of made their opening statements, and so now I'll give the floor to Julie and to Mike, question and answer, and maybe even some of our panelists might have some other questions for each other. And Julie, we'll start with you. It looks like your mic is muted though. You want to unmute yourself there. And Mike, there you guys go. And guess what? I'm gonna disappear. Let me know who your first question is for, Julie.
All right. I guess my first question is for Aaron and Key, and also Joy. What are the barriers for participation for people of color in the industry and Black folks in particular?
It starts right in the policy and with licensing. It's one thing to say capital, but it's the licensing. You can't even get licenses at this point. And then it's exactly what Ian said is capital. And then it's, those are the very first two barriers. And then on top of that, when you add in gentrification, which took all the Black-owned land, houses, buildings and properties, there's also not even that connection to be able to have a space to do it where you're not becoming preyed upon landlords, predatory landlords and things like that. There's also not the lending piece. There's also the lack of technical assistance and job training in it. There's a 6-year head start on it. So there's clearly an education on how and what to do and what not to do. So I'm sure Joy can actually tell you a bunch of the stuff that she's been through, Key as well.
Yeah, Aaron spoke about it. I know Ian mentioned it. The capital piece is huge. The other part is the licensing piece. So, Washington State has a closed licensing. You can't just go down and apply for a license like you can open up like any small business, right? That's like the biggest piece. Another piece, like Aaron says, the technical assistant, knowing how. We saw a lot of people go from growing to farming on the producer processor side. There's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of compliance stuff. There's a lot of tax stuff that you got to think about. There's a lot of stuff to running a store that, like Aaron said, people have 6 years ahead since they started the industry. So when people are going to come in during social equity licensing, it's going to be playing catch up for the last 6 years for them to get established with these licenses.
Can you explain what is social equity licensing? Sorry.
Aaron?
I was saying from my perspective, I run an ancillary
So,
business.
I don't know. So right now they have social equity licensing, House Bill 2870, broken down to that. There's an 18-seat task force that is going to decide who gets, I think it's even an undetermined number, but I think it's somewhere around 52 licenses for retail licenses at this point. That's going to be determined by an 18-seat task force. Nobody from the community sitting on that task force. Nobody would even, there's some people on there like Joy's brother, Raph, Paula, Sardines. There's Melody Morgan and, a couple of people, but for the most part, it's made up of people who have no incentive to even care about what goes on in the community. Social equity in the state of Washington, social means everybody and equity means ownership. So in order for this to be a protectable system, one thing we've seen in LA is predatory operating agreements where, people who don't have the technical know-how are getting hammered and losing businesses because of bad operating agreements, right? Social equity means social everybody equity owns. It needs to be cooperatively owned licenses. And that's the only way you're going to be able to protect these social equity licenses from predatory lenders, investors, the industry as a whole. You know, taking an Uncle Ike's and turning that into a cooperative-owned model.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to loop back around to Key for the first question of what do you see as the barriers for participation in the industry? Oh, but she's not up right now.
Key popped off. We're gonna wait for
Okay.
Key to come back. I think Mike's up next.
Sure, yeah. So I wanted to ask, so are there places where people from the community who may be interested in trying to get into the industry, where can we go to get education? Like I heard that other cities like Oakland do have education as far as how to enter the marijuana industry. Do we have that here in Seattle?
Who's your question for, Mike?
Um,
Who do you want? Who are you aiming it towards? I can pull them all up.
Oh, Aaron and Joy.
So right now, what you're seeing in Oakland.
So to answer that, no, it hasn't been addressed anything. There's not even a cannabis officer that's appointed by the city. There's not one that's appointed by the state. If it's going to be done, it has to be done on a private level from people who are owners like Joy and her brother, like, and saying this is what happened, but it's not coming from anywhere on a policy level like it is anywhere else. It's social equity in this state has been completely ignored by the people, by the powers that be. And now they act like the victim when the communities are saying, look, enough is enough. You know, it's been 8 years of give us one more month, give us one more month, give us one more month. It's been 8 years and nothing has been put in place. Nothing.
And I think also too, if I could just say one thing, what I've learned a lot from connecting with the community, talking to Aaron, like trying to build out an inclusive social equity plan, is that we got to think outside the box besides just ownership within the cannabis industry. It's also like restoring some of these big pieces within the Black community: gentrification, home ownership, food insecurity. You have centering small business, all these different things that, you know, ripped out the community during the war on drugs, right? Those are tentacles that happen within the community. And thinking outside the box, it's not just about ownership and getting people that, you know, own these stores and farms that are Black. It's also restoring the harm to the community with building up a lot of those building blocks that help center the community. That's huge.
Huge.
And Joy, you are on the task force that the state has just convened, right, about making recommendations for social equity legislation.
Actually,
Can you talk a little?
That's my brother. So my brother is yeah. So, but you know,
apologies.
No, you're good. You're good. That's my little brother. He's on the task force for social equity. So is Paula Sardinas, who we've been working with, and you know, other people that people can look up. But I think their first meeting is Monday, actually. So tomorrow, where they're going to be talking about the first stages. They're behind significantly because of COVID. I know that's the 2020 word, because of COVID, right? So they've been pushed back tremendously. But you know, hopefully the cities can get on board, like Seattle, Tacoma, all these different cities that have traditionally a more so larger Black population. They can really figure out an inclusive social equity plan that expands beyond ownership level as well.
So Aaron, I think you brought up something interesting around social equity and the idea of taking existing businesses and trying to expand the ownership to more of a co-op model. Has there been any success in Seattle with that model, and are current business owners open to that? And I know we have Ian on right now. We can pose that question to him as well. But since you mentioned it, I wanted to send it your way first.
Yeah, no, I think the cooperative ownership models is something that's new in Seattle, and a lot of people look at it as an anti-capitalist model, but it's just a different model of capitalism. I mean, it works. There's bigger models, like Publix is a worker-owned cooperative, Ace Hardware, I believe Enterprise is. There's already big models, Fortune 500 companies that you can model after. Now, is it perfect? No, but what it does do is it protects the license, and it protects the community from a one-person win, which has, you know, if Sean Kemp's store has no value in my life or the community's life whatsoever. That's not a community win, and it needs to be community win. It needs to be all of us owning that were previously affected by the war on drugs. So it needs to come in a different fashion. I don't think that there's too many even cooperatively owned businesses in the city of Seattle that are successful. A couple bike shops, a couple cafes, but nothing past that. It's been on the East Coast in Chicago, Baltimore. They're big. Jackson, Mississippi, Jackson Rising. Read that book, you guys. They have some great some great models. And I've got the history of Black electives too. That really breaks down some of the cooperative models that Black folks have used throughout history to create very sustainable, durable businesses. A lot of them were created in the 60s, are still around.
So everything Aaron just said, in addition, because the way I-502 that we all voted on and became the law, it's everybody who's an owner is what's considered a true party of interest, and they have to go through vetting with background, criminal history, financial, everything about them, and it takes a long time. It's a lot of paperwork, and if there's a cooperative model, everybody would have to go through that, and then there's unforeseen problems. Like the next year, you have to renew your license. Every one of those cooperative owners would have to go in and get fingerprinted and agree to do it. So one 2% owner could hold up the entire license. So it would take a lot of changes in Olympia to allow for that kind of cooperative model. But I think it's worthwhile. I totally agree with him.
Julie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was curious, what are those, I guess, those barriers to licensing? What qualifies somebody to get a license? What would prevent people from doing so? And then how does this also relate to, the disparate enforcement that we saw during war on drugs and that sort of history, that sort of background?
Yeah, two things. First, there's the money. Any money you put into the business, you have to be able to show where it came from. And the State Liquor Control Board they do a pretty thorough job of vetting every last dollar of what bank account it came from, or where if it came from another business or what have you. And that was back in the day. That was so that criminal enterprises didn't, find their way into the Washington cannabis market, which I don't think ever really happened anyway. But then there's also the criminal history, and that's part of 502. And Aaron, you're allowed to have a certain number of points, and misdemeanors count for a certain number of points, and felonies, and they fall off after so many years. I think you can have it's a pretty complicated system.
Yeah, it was a point system, and it was like in a reverse point system.
Yeah.
Like for the more felonies, the less points you had. I don't remember. It was some weird system they came up with that was just really BS.
Okay. Well, I kind of want to shift a little bit. Still with the idea of social equity, I would like to pose the question to Ian. What do you feel that your responsibility is to the communities where you're doing business, where we have seen a lot of displacement and we have seen a lot of gentrification, and now your business is here. You appear to be doing very well. What do you feel that your specific responsibility is to the community?
Sure. And I think it's easier just to focus on the Central District as opposed to Lake City or Capitol Hill. I like to gentrification, displacement, two different things, but they're often just all bundled into one. In the Central District, it's, sure, I'm a gentrifying factor. I get it. I was the first two businesses to really start up in a long time here on this corner, just my corner. And now there's a lot more moving in. There's, coffee shops, there's the PCC. And we try to give back to the community, and we do a lot of giving. I'm not sure if it's enough. It probably isn't. But we're always open to ideas of how we can get more involved and do more.
Would you support the codification of, white-owned cannabis shops in the historically red-light areas, such as the CD, the codification of there being some sort of obligation as a part of social equity legislation of giving back a percentage or something like this?
Sure. Yeah. It's with the current laws, giving a percentage back would be illegal. You can't do that in I-502. That would be, again, what I explained before, that true party of interest violation. Same way you can't have percentage rent or percentage giving. We do give back a percentage. I think we're doing it based on net now. We were doing it based on gross, various fundraisers of the year. But yeah, I totally agree with that and would be happy to explore it.
Aaron, I read in an article in Entrepreneur, I think people were expressing some concern about the task force, and this might have been the other Aaron, expressing some concern that the state task force, now that's been convened, doesn't really have any teeth, any bite power to influence legislation. I guess this is for all of you. What are your thoughts on that, and what kind of pressure could be put on to ensure that some more progressive solutions are posed and followed through on?
Right now, I think like Joy alluded to earlier, tomorrow is the first meeting for the Social Equity Task Force, the 18 board task force, and I think they're going to take some input from the community. They're going to get some presentations on data and metrics, and I think that's where the pressure points need to come on. Look and figure out what district you live in. Put the pressure on your state rep to get on the task force to make the right decisions, not decisions based upon the same ideology. I mean, just using the word marijuana in legal government forms is kind of, like they're not even addressing the issues from within in their own wording. So it's kind of one of those things. Get your community to get on the task force, to get on, or your state rep to get onto the task force people, to really have an incentive to want to do the right thing for the community.
It's kind of important too to understand that the task force can only do as much as Senate Bill 2870 allows them to do from last year. So it's really important in Olympia for people to show up when these bills come out, because 2870 almost died until Rebecca Saldana kept it alive last year. But usually when there's bills that like this, or the homegrown bills in Olympia, nobody shows up to testify for them.
Do you have a follow-up, Julia, or can I jump in?
Please.
Okay, so I just kind of wanted to shift and ask Breon. You mentioned that you got into the industry in 2010, and then I think you said around 2013 you were pushed out. Can you elaborate that with us and let us know what exactly happened to you?
So I started the medical marijuana dispensary called The Game. It was called Greenpeace Alternative Medicine and Education, but the acronym was called GAME. So basically what I did, I had two other partners. They were white, and we each had a store. One in North End, I had one in West Seattle, and the other guy had one in White Center. And so what had happened was, apparently they didn't like the fact that I started the business, right? So I guess to them, they had got some letters, is what they tried to say, from somebody in the community. And so what they did was they did a 5-month investigation, tried to get me to break a bunch of laws. None of it worked. But regardless, the feds came in. They had made a deal with the state, and they worked with the state. The state sold me the business license and worked with Jenny Durkin, who is now the mayor of Seattle. They worked with her to actually first to try to get me to break the state laws, and they couldn't. So then they just used the federal laws and got me out of business. Never charged me with a felony. They never charged my two white business partners with anything. Never pulled a gun on them. Never did anything to them. Me out of the business, just, and for no apparent reason. One of the things I was like, well, why can't I do it? And one of the things that they kept saying to me, the federal assistant prosecutor, which was Vince Lombardi III, kept saying, we don't care about everyone else. We just don't want you in the business. I was like, what? But you know what that means. Everybody knows what that means, right? So it was one of those things that they were sending a message to everyone, that if you're African American, we don't want you in here, no matter how well you run your business. And the better you run your business, the more we're going to come after you, because, we were totally organized. We had our monthly meetings. We kept minutes. We were just totally, everybody made sure that everybody operated at a certain level. And, it was just, it was just unfortunate that, systemic racism still exists in this country, because it was a really good business that I really put a couple of good years into. And, we were getting into the 502. We were setting our business up to really be able to get involved in this 502. And what was so crazy was that the state came down and talked to me about it, all the while knowing they were working with the feds to take me out of business, right? So then they come in and they find out all our plans and all this kind of stuff, and basically they just said, no, we don't want you to do it. You're not in it, because the way our business was set up, we could have had like anywhere from 3 to like 7 of our people actually qualify for those licenses, and we had the money to pay for it. So they were not gonna have that.
Right.
So no one ended up with license?
Say that again?
So no one that you were working with ended up with those licenses?
Well, no, they all ran.
Oh.
They all ran, ran. I ain't talked to them 2 white dudes since the day that shit happened. And so that's 7-8 years ago, right? I ain't talked to those cats. They peer on, far away. But what's so crazy is that they never ever got guns put on them. But like me and some of my employees were African American. They just pulled out assault rifles all on us, while they let the white guy with the gun sit up on the couch. And I'm just going like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture here, right? So it was it was all about race. It had nothing to do with anything. They didn't care how well the business ran. It was really just, we're getting your black ass the fuck out of here. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry.
All right, now Big Mama and them watching.
I'm sorry.
All right, no, you're all good. But look, we're gonna put you in timeout. All right. So good thing is we have Key Porter back. We lost Key for a second, but we do need to keep on program. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, the discussion goes to where do Black people currently fit into the cannabis industry in Washington State, and like we have some great perspective here because we have Joy Hollingsworth, who's in one area. We have our advocacy people. We also have Ian, who's in the business. Man, what's he seeing out there? Where's he at with this? So take a short break right now. When we come right back, the question is, where do Black people currently fit into the cannabis industry? And we're going to go around the horn.
We're right here at East Precinct. It doesn't get any closer than this right now.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. As a small independent media company, we rely on the financial support of individuals and business members to stay on the front lines of the news that's important to you. All right, welcome back. See, I told you that was going to be a quick break, Julie. It was so quick that Mike didn't make it back. I was like, there he is. We're gonna have to put a timer on these for you, Mike. So you can.
Fast, man. That was so fast.
All right. So we're gonna go around the horn again with our question out here, and let's see. Let's start with Joy. I'm giving you I told you I'd give you a heads up before we put you on screen. Let's start with Joy. Let's bring Joy in right now. And Joy, question is, where do Black people currently fit into the cannabis industry or ecosystem in Washington State? You have a unique perspective. You guys have a tier 3 grow operation, the biggest tier in the state. Tell us, what are you seeing? Where are Black people at in this industry?
Well, currently, like I was saying, there's 1% less ownership right now. So we do see a little bit of like a lot of the bud tenders, security guards, like we had mentioned. But I think looking forward, where could we see them? Where can we see our people like really benefit from? Our ancillary businesses. So that's coming up with different apps. Maybe they're doing packaging. Maybe they're doing a delivery service if that license ever becomes available. Maybe they can do consumption lounges, restaurants, like different things that support the businesses. You think of that model like Amazon. They don't make anything on their like catalog, but they're big on, their distribution logistics. Coming up with something like that, I think is huge, especially if someone does not want to touch the plant or sell the plant, because, I don't think a lot of people understand Washington State's one of the highest tax rated businesses for cannabis at 37% tax. And then you got to pay your federal taxes, even though it's not federally legal. It's still the Al Capone rule where you still have to pay taxes. So, and nothing's a write-off. So you're talking about over 50-something% of, getting taxed. And those profit margins are so slim and small because in Washington State, you can't be vertically integrated. So a person who grows it can't maximize on that profit margin to sell directly to the consumer. So thinking about ancillary businesses are a lot lower barriers for people to get into where they can really continue to grow their small businesses.
Okay. All right. AB, hey, Mr. Bossett, look, there he goes. So, you do a lot of advocacy work. I talked to you and you're like, man, you were down in Olympia, you were pushing this legislation. So, from your perspective at the Black Cannabis Commission, where do Black people currently fit into the cannabis industry or ecosystem here in Washington State?
Creating your own. There's no time to ask or keep playing with these policymakers. There's no reason to keep asking and begging to get into an industry. That only reason you're not allowed in is the policy, not for any other reason. Not that you can't do it, not because you don't have good ideas, not because you can't run a good business. It simply has to be creating and doing it on your own. And I'm not telling people to break the law because legal cannabis in the state of Washington is still federally illegal, right? So it's just deciding which side the LCB wants to enforce. I think Brion and Chris have the fact that the LCB sometimes doesn't even have enforcement laws that they're running around here enforcing. So unfortunately, Black folks are put into a situation to have to be innovators. They're going to have to innovate. There's no way into the so-called legal industry. It's time to just go get your own, do Airbnbs, do tourism, host dinners, sell it to your friends. They have cooperative models for medical people. So it exists in LCB already if you are a medical caregiver, right? So there's the same thing that we can use for ourselves.
Right. Okay. Key Porter, we lost you some in the last segment. I know you weren't originally in this segment, but hey, here we are right here. I think you got something to add to it. There's Key. Where do Black people currently fit into the cannabis industry in Washington State?
Well, I think currently we feel that we've reached the ceiling when it comes to the different positions in retail, producer processing, distributing. It's like management and no higher than that. I think now we're becoming extremely more innovative, like Bossett was saying, coming up with ancillary businesses such like the greenhouse and trying to find different ways and not being directly plant touching at all, but just supporting the industry. That's what Black people have always done and will continue doing, is finding innovative ways to support the cannabis industry until we can actually emerge into it and get a percentage into the industry. But I believe we'll just keep on doing what we have been doing, and it's just providing ways for people to experience plant medicine.
All right. And let's go over to Ian. Ian, question right here. I'll just repeat it. Where do Black people? You own 5 shops. I think you might be the second or third biggest. What number are you now? You used to be number 1, right?
No, not nowhere close to it anymore.
Oh, okay.
Other parts of the states are a lot more profitable than Seattle.
All right. Well, you own 5 businesses. Are all 5 of your businesses within the city limits?
No, one's in White Center.
Okay. So Seattle area general. So from your perspective, where do Black people currently fit into the cannabis industry in Washington? I know a lot of people, when you think of Uncle Ike's, clearly you think of the security. You've always got lots of Black people out there in front, doing security. You got people who work inside. But on the bigger picture in this conversation here, when we talk about ownership or equity and moving forward and everything else, where do Black people currently, when you look around here as an owner, where do Black people currently fit into the ecosystem?
No, I was just trying to add them up while Joy was speaking with her 1%, and I could come up with 11 retail stores and then only a handful of producer processors that are 100% Black owned, and that's in the state. And I think the Black population is about 3 or 4% in the state and about 7% in Seattle, something like that. And really, I'll say it again, it comes back to access to capital. And access to capital has a lot to do with what Joy mentioned about the taxes. There's this thing called 280E. And we're the only industry in the entire country where you can't deduct expenses. And you can't deduct payroll, lights, water, rent, anything. And that limits who wants to invest in this business. So somebody starting out a new business, even a social equity license, will have a hard time growing to a competitive level because of these factors. Back in the medical days, a grow could be small, 1,000 square feet, and still be competitive because you could sell in your own store. It was vertically integrated. In I-502, you're not vertically integrated. The cost of building a grow now is in the millions and millions of dollars. And it's just going to keep going up. There'll be consolidation. So I kind of agree with what Aaron had to say about the auxiliary businesses are probably more profitable at this point than the direct marijuana touching businesses. And because they have tax advantages, and they can get, well, in Washington State, we can't have ownership from outside of Washington State. So if you had a cousin in Chicago that wanted to invest in your cannabis store in Seattle, they can't be an owner. And so that limits the access to capital. So it's sort of, a lot of these changes have to be made structurally in Olympia. And I'm not sure what, at least this year, I doubt there's much appetite for that with the budget problems. But there's no question that Black ownership is underrepresented in Seattle and Washington State.
All right. And Breonna, we got time to bring you in on this segment as well. We've got a few minutes though, because we got to get to the question and answer. Where, you've been at it, man. You said 2010, that's a decade. Right now in this moment, where do Black people currently fit into the cannabis industry, into the cannabis ecosystem here in Washington State?
Well, I think we fit on top, actually. That's where we should be. I think that, there are a lot of different avenues, like he said, that, ancillary businesses that we can get into. But what I want people to understand is ancillary businesses are cool, but we want the rec stores, right? And we can deal with the business part of getting the investment. We probably should stop, trying to make it so that, making it seem like it's almost impossible to do this business because we don't have access to funds. Well, some of us do have access to funds, and we should probably leave it at that, right? We got it, right? But just like any other business, it takes funds, right? So that should not be something that stands in our way because of, somebody's perception of our lack of funds, right? Because evidently, we wanted to get into the business. And then two, I think where our current state is, we're in almost like a desperate, it's like we're almost in a desperate because we see all this generational wealth being built, and and we're not invited to the party, right? And so we're like Aaron's ready to create his own party, right? Because we haven't been able to get in the door of that party. So like I said, it's fucked up, but we keep pushing, we'll knock the door down.
All right. Ooh, hey, that was big on me. Real quick, and Joy, I think you might be able to give a quick explanation here. Somebody in the comments, it says here, can anyone explain to me? You explained it before. I think the viewer just got on. Can we explain to me what vertically integrated means? Don't want to stop watching to Google it.
Absolutely. So vertically integrated means that in Washington State, you can be a producer, processor, but you cannot be a retail owner. So I'm not able to sell directly to the consumer. I can only sell to a retail store like Ian, who then can sell direct to consumer, whoever wants to purchase that cannabis. So Washington State's I think it's the only state where you can't be vertically integrated. Colorado's vertically integrated, California is vertically integrated, Illinois will be, Maryland, Oregon's vertically integrated. Every other state is vertically integrated except Washington State.
And Joy, real fast, just to clarify, does that also work the opposite direction? Does that mean that someone like Ian could not be a grower processor?
You cannot own a producer processor license. But and they made it that way to create, so they didn't have monopolies. You see these gigantic companies popping up in different, places all around the country that, own all three, and they own these mega farms. And so they wanted to make it, I guess, equally accessible for people. But someone like me, there's pros and cons to it. One of the con side is, we feel like we've been taking baby steps since we started because, you're not able to capitalize off that direct to consumer. But then there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of more product in the industry. The customer likes it because the price has gone down tremendously to be able to buy, cannabis and weed. So, there's positives and negatives for everything.
All right. So let's jump over here. Let's see, I'm manipulating all these buttons here. So first question, you got to unmute yourself, Julie C.
Yes.
There you go. First question is yours.
I actually wanted to circle back to Key because we lost her for the first section. But Key, I know that you have just spent the last few weeks participating in a cohort that has been a national cohort about social equity in the industry. And so I wanted to ask you specifically, what have you learned from that? And also, what have you seen as the big differences about what Washington State is doing or could be doing to make the industry more equitable?
Okay, so I am a part of a 13-week mentorship program through the state of California, teaching social equity applicants the process from start to finish, how to apply, all the way down to getting partnerships and working hand in hand with those partnerships and the state to basically generate revenue with BIPOC communities. And so for me being a Washington resident and, seeing firsthand the relationship down there with their social equity applicants and also with their state, and that, Washington basically is one of the last states to kind of implement this and run it forward. It's been an eye-opening experience for me to see that it is actually possible. I just think it's extremely important for us to transmute the relationship that we have with our city and state, with the LCB, with different business models in cannabis, and work together to really try to find ways of inclusion for Blacks in particular, but also the BIPOC community to be involved in the cannabis industry.
Thank you.
So the question that I want to pose to the group. I understand the idea of the ancillary businesses and all the different businesses that can support the industry, but I do want to bring the conversation back to direct ownership. I think I've heard a couple of times how thin the margins can be and that there's the 50% tax rate, but I mean, we're still talking about millions and millions of dollars that are being generated by a lot of these retailers. So can one of the owners, I know Ian is in here, so maybe this would be you, but even with the heavy taxing, isn't it still worth it to try to get into ownership because it still has to be profitable?
Yes and no. Since I-502 started, I can't tell you how many growers, producer processors, and retailers have gone out of business. That's why licenses were available. That's why I bought licenses. They went out of business. That's why the Kemp license was a previous operator that didn't succeed and somebody else bought it. There's a lot of turnover in this industry. But yeah, direct ownership is probably always the path to generational wealth. There's no question about that. But it's not as good of an industry as everybody thought. And a lot of it has to do just because it is a legal industry now. So margins fall, and cannabis is a commodity, somewhat of a commodity, and retailers are somewhat of a commodity. So it's not the same as it was when it was back in the medical days.
A quick follow-up that I'll put out to the panel. I heard people mention as well that banks are hesitant to lend for cannabis. Where would someone who wants to get into the industry go to find a lender?
That's $1 million question right there.
They have them. They're out there. For sure. I mean, you got hard money lenders out there willing to give money. You got I mean, because I know several myself. You got these certain banks that are out here that are really, especially if you talk to what's her name? She's on the board. You guys were just talking about her. I can't remember her name, but she's the one that got this legislation passed for the social equity program. Paula, yeah. I mean, she ran off a few names of banks at that meeting that they had last spring. So, yeah, those banks are out there willing to work with us African Americans on these businesses.
I've been pretty established, and I've had to go to hard money lenders, and in one case, a credit union loan. But it's not traditional lending, and we're talking really high interest rates. And I've had assets to put up as collateral, which is the big difference.
So then bouncing back to you, Ian, as somebody who's sort of on the forefront of this visibility-wise, are you interested in diversifying the ownership of Uncle Ike's by giving your Black or brown employees stake in the company some sort of way, of figuring out creative solutions to help people get into the industry based off of the relationships that you currently have?
Okay, on the first side of the question, letting employees be owners, it's not really allowed under the framework of how the licensing works right now. It wouldn't be practical or doable. Plus, I have lenders that I'd have to answer to. I can't just give away the company. But in terms of helping other people get into the industry, absolutely. I think that's one thing that the industry is going to have to do with the social equity licenses. We have a 6-year head start. Part of that head start, of course, is establishing our brands, establishing our stores, but it's also what we've learned. We've learned a lot. We've made a lot of mistakes in the past 6 years. I think it's our obligation to kind of pass that along and help other people.
And what might that look like from your perspective?
You mean in terms of mentorship or in terms of actually operating?
Either way.
I think I've talked to Paula Sardinas about this, about some sort of mentorship program. I think she'll probably put something together, or the task force will, and that's a really good idea. I'm sorry, the other part of the question?
I think that was the question.
I have a follow-up, Ian, on just the social equity licenses. Yes.
One thing I'll add that maybe people don't get, when the industry started, we were allowed to own 3 retail stores. Now it changed about 2 years ago to 5 retail stores. The producer processors are limited to owning 3 licenses. So the biggest you can be is 3 of Joy's of tier 3 licenses. And again, the state put that together to limit monopolies, I guess. But it's also somewhat limited efficiencies. Like if you had a 10 retail store chain, you'd have a lot more efficiencies than one store. And one store of some social equity license has one store. It's going to be hard to compete with a chain of 5 or more stores, because everything is going to be about efficiencies.
Can you tell us just a little bit more about the social equity licenses specifically? How would one go about getting one? How difficult is the process, and maybe some of the drawbacks? I think you just mentioned one, in that, like, the amount of businesses you're allowed to own. But can you elaborate just a little bit more on those social equity licenses?
I don't think anybody knows right now, because the board's going to have the task force has their first meeting this week. All the specifics haven't been worked out.
So,
Aaron, did you have?
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
I thought Aaron was going to add to that answer.
I was just gonna add, is like what Ian's saying, it's all about policy right now, and right now the way it's set up, there's nothing that a current owner could do or Ian could do to like diversify, because of how the policy is set up. It's going to take us going down there. The task force actually meets tomorrow. It's their first meeting tomorrow to address this social equity. So hopefully in another month, it's been 8 years a month, but hopefully in another month we'll have some more ideas or better path to how we get to those licenses.
Okay, Aaron. So what we're saying is, as of right now, right here today, there are no social equity licenses yet. I think you're close.
I mean, I could go on and on. No,
Okay.
there's not. It's just there tomorrow. I mean, there's supposed to be a path to 32 retail licenses, but then who gets them? And that's what's going to be discussed, right? For this 18PC task force. So as of right now, no, there is no way to path to ownership in social equity right now. It's just been talk for 8 years.
All right, I'm back in here, back in on the mix. Did either of you guys have any other questions along the lines of where Black people are currently at in the ecosystem? No. Yeah. No. You're good. All right. We'll move to the next.
I mean, I guess a question I do have is, if it's the case that there are all these ceilings and the industry is so inequitable and there aren't any measures put in place, is it safe to say that as a conscientious consumer of cannabis, you would be doing it would be good to be consuming based on markets that do provide a kind of an equalized equity versus in the rec shop ecosystem right now?
I don't smoke, man. I don't know.
I mean, I'm asking, I'm not telling people, but this is like a real question, right? If it's the case that this is not an industry that is,
I think I see a reaction there from Aaron. We'll bring him up here. You had a comment on that, Aaron?
Yes. Support anything and anybody outside of the system that can be self-sustaining.
And that's real. That's part of capacity building, right?
I see Joy giggling. I see Joy down there giggling
I don't know.
as
I mean,
well.
the only thing that's stopping him is some white guy saying we can't have a license. I mean, it's a legit business. There's no reason to stop the kids. Let them,
I think also
pay their taxes on it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Aaron. My bad. I think also too is recognizing the brands that have a little bit of social consciousness to them, that want to give back to the community, want to help, rebuild some of those structures. So, and there are some other brands out there that are minority owned, BIPOC owned. You have Infuse, right? With Jeff Freeman. You have Vertiloo that's up north. That's Asian owned. You have, it's not like a lot, but you do have some people in the industry that you can go and support, and continue that are giving back to the communities and thinking about that way. So they are out there as well. Okay. But not a lot. But they're there, but not a lot. Okay.
So it's valid to say supporting, the underground market is a step towards equity in this industry right now.
I'm not saying to do that, but if y'all want to go do that, that's fine. That
is that what you meant by that? I'm slow. I'm the only person.
That's actually absolutely what I meant by the question. Yeah. I know that
I'm the only person on this whole
ethical
thing
consumption is a thing
that don't I'm the square on this. I'm like, man, well, what is she talking now? Duh, I get it. Okay.
So buy from your weed man.
I mean, it's a great question. I think this is why I was so excited when I seen Sean Kemp. It's like, oh, I can shop with us. I try to shop Black whenever I can, but this is one area where it's hard to do so unless you're supporting the youth in the streets. And there's nothing wrong with that. I understand what Aaron's point is, but I really would just love to see us have some stake and some ownership. That 1% number is alarming to me.
All right. So we're gonna move it along here. I think we're gonna go into segment number 3, and this is where Chris King, he has his blog post up, and he has these legal filings and some of everything else. But before we go to break and come back to you, Chris, just for TV audience, man, I know you're a lawyer and you can be long-winded. we gonna keep these summaries kind of short here. But I do before we cut you loose here, Ian, definitely want to bring up, we see the videos there on Twitter, this and that, the protests. You got a cameo there the other day, security pushing the people, the protesters that are out there. I got you on my platform. Would be remiss not to talk to you about, your thoughts, your end here about the protests that occurred there at Uncle Ike's. Do you feel that people understand your business? Do you feel, I mean, clearly it looks like it can get intense over there in front of some of your shops, is what we saw there the other day. I mean, what's it like from your perspective?
Yeah, it does get intense. I should probably just stay away. But, a lot of the protesters aren't from this neighborhood. They're not from Seattle, I don't think. The ones handing out those little flyers at that last week's, I can't even start to comment on some of the allegations they're making about us. It's just insanity. It reminds me of like Alex Jones Pizzagate. They're just completely fabricated, and they don't answer to anybody. When they're black protests, I could kind of respect and understand where they're coming from, but the ones like up on 15th, they just didn't make any sense at all. When they're accusing us of gentrifying Capitol Hill 15th, it really doesn't make any sense.
Did you have a follow-up, Mike? It looks like you wanted to ask something.
Well, I think he kind of addressed it as like people who don't live in the neighborhood, but I would be thinking more of the CD and some of the people who did live in the neighborhood but are no longer able to live in the neighborhood. And I asked before just about how you felt your responsibility was to the community, and you said that you make donations. Do you care to get a little more specific and let us know where those donations are?
But I think it's more than that. I should be a good neighbor. I should invest in the Black community. I should be engaged in Black community events, and I should hire people from the community that have been impacted by the failed war on drugs. I totally get that. We're starting in the past. What actual things that we've donated money to? Is that the question?
Yes.
Country Doctor, the Odessa Brown Medical Clinic, Entre Hermanos, whatever the bail fund recently. What is it called?
I think that's what it's called, the bail fund.
The bail fund. Yeah, I think we gave them like 30 grand last month. And I think moving forward, we're giving our two charities we'll be focusing on are the Last Prisoner Project for people that are still incarcerated from the war on drugs, as well as the Black Founders Co-op Fund.
Did you have any question for him, Julie? In regards to current protests with Ian's business, there definitely a focal point of protesters.
Not so much. I'm curious what the Black Founders Co-op Fund is about. Cannabis equity?
No, I think it's no. I don't think it's specific to cannabis equity. I'm not sure there are any funds that are specific to that.
Gotcha.
It's the Michelle Merriweather and I forget the founders.
I think that's the Urban League. If it's Merriweather.
Yeah.
Well, where are you? Clearly, if you're saying you're giving, are you opposed then to donating more towards causes for social equity around cannabis? This clear issue that we're here on today.
One disadvantage that my company has compared to other companies of how much they can donate, we spend a lot of money on every one of my employees. They have fully paid medical insurance. And I think we're the only cannabis retailer in the state that does that. And that's sort of where all of our free cash flow ends up going. And I don't really want to get rid of that, so I could just donate more money to different causes. I think it's kind of important to our company, who we are.
All right. Any other questions for Ian before we cut him loose?
Yeah, I guess it's just more so. I was listening to a podcast about Canada's social equity legislation around cannabis. And they were talking about the role that private industry had really in getting that passed. And so on the legislative level, Ian, you were talking about a lot of the laws that are barriers to more progressive practices for yourself or for folks in the industry. Can you speak on your willingness to sort of participate in that policy change that can make things more equitable?
Sure. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time in Olympia for the past 6 years. I've learned more about, I don't think I really understood how civics worked. Lobbying policymakers and testifying on bills. I know that there was recently a protest in front of our shop, and I think it was Nikita that was talking about how I needed to be at the forefront of allowing home grow, because not allowing homegrown marijuana hurt BIPOC communities more than other communities. Well, I was the only one there for the past 3 years testifying for that bill. Where were the 1,000 people that were marching down 23rd? If they had gone to Olympia, that bill would have passed. That's kind of what I mean, that people have to get involved. It's great to have a representative sponsor a bill, but unless people come up to support it, it's not going to pass.
All right, we'll leave it there, Ian. Man, thank you for joining us. Thank you for hopping on, and I definitely want to keep this conversation going. So when we meet again, hopefully you'll join us again there as well.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So cool. We're gonna take a quick break. I mean, and so Mike, now you know that these breaks are quick, man. Don't be going and making no sandwich, because when we come back, we're gonna have Christopher King, and Christopher King is talking all this legal stuff. Yeah, we'll be right back.
We're right here at East Precinct. It doesn't get any closer than this right now.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. As a small independent media company, we rely on the financial support of individuals and business members to stay on the front lines of the news that's important to you. All right, welcome back. We have, look at this, man. Christopher King .J.D.A.K/A King K. Hey man, I ain't mad at you. All right, so Christopher, welcome. I know you've been back there backstage for a minute, man. I'm glad you didn't fall asleep back there.
No. I went to make a sandwich.
Oh, okay. You made the sandwich. Well, next break, make sure and make Mike one too. So look, but before we go into some of this legal stuff that you're working on, I mean, man, you wrote this thing. This is you who wrote this.
That's correct.
It says Sean Kemp Cannabis, not Black owned, and does not fix Washington State Liquor Control Board. Now, just take a minute or two here, because it's all time oriented. We can't read the whole thing on air. But what exactly are you saying here about the Sean Kemp Cannabis, and why you're saying it's not Black owned?
Because it isn't. Let's get one thing straight right from the get. All right. My partners and I at 2OG Smoking Weed, one of us knows Sean Kemp personally. We want to congratulate him on getting what he's got so far. That's the first thing that we need to talk about. But the fact that it takes a man of his stature, an international athlete, a demigod on the basketball court, he's right up behind Dr. J and all those guys, right? The fact that it took him to get a few percentage points does not bode well for the industry. So let me address your direct question then, which is, what's the essence of the press release?
Correct.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, I was really flexible in thinking about tonight's show. And what I did was I thought about, okay, one of the toughest things to do as a lawyer and as a journalist is to try to demystify the law. And so what I want to do tonight, then, based on what I've heard so far tonight, is I just want to help other people understand that the law is really built in part on social context and what happens in terms of in our society. You have a statute, you have laws, you have constitutional laws, but I'm not going to get into the rigmarole of all that, because the bottom line is, when you have a law, do not be mystified as a non-lawyer about what that law means. You're allowed to use your common sense, okay? So right before I explain to you what this means, I'm going to give you one Latin term. And this is the first thing they teach you in law school in terms of liability. And that term is res ipsa loquitur. What does that mean? Res ipsa loquitur means the thing speaks for itself. Okay. So when we look at these 50 retail shops without any Black representation there, and I want to differ just for a minute on part of what Ian was saying. Yes, price and cost is a factor, but Breon just testified a minute ago. that, hey, we had the money. So what we're talking about here is that, and I'll blend right into the press release and what the essence of the release is, because the essence of the release is that cannabis now is basically the Jim Crow. It's the new Jim Crow. You have people that were qualified financially as well as in a business model that were eligible to get retail licenses, but they did not through no fault of their own. So res ipsa loquitur means that through no fault of our own, we were denied access. We were harmed. Our dreams were harmed. Our family was harmed. Our community was harmed. Okay? And so that's what the essence of the press release is. And in a minute, then I will tell you about each specific lawsuit that I'm involved in. But you have to lay a predicate for all of this. And I'm telling you this just as I would tell a jury. You know, I've won jury trials on civil rights, okay? So this is how I break it down to them. Don't belie your common sense. When you see something that's happening like that in front of you and you recognize it, you know, there's probably something going on that's wrong. You know, there's something fishy in Denmark.
Well, let me jump in here real quick because but before you move on,
Sure.
I mean you're saying, I mean, because in one line we're saying that Sean Kemp is a 10% owner of the business,
Exactly.
or whatever percent, which would make him an owner. But then you're also saying that he's not an owner. So are you saying that he's not an owner because he's not on the license, and will he get on the license, or he's not an owner because he's at 10%, or you know where is it, so the viewers can understand why you're saying that Sean Kemp is not owner of the first black, and why this is not the first black dispensary. Can you draw a straight line to your rationale with that?
Well, what I stated exactly was that it's not black owned. Okay, so when we get down to it, as everybody else discussed too, you know, I don't know what the magic number is in terms of a percentage, but like I say, on reason and belief, on information and belief, his percentage is under 10%. Okay. So, you know, I have some friends, we drive like foreign cars, and some of us have car shares. All right. If I were to look at somebody and say, hey, you know, that Porsche's like, that's mine, you know, and really I own like less than 10% of it. That's not mine. You know, I own a piece of it, but I'm a minority owner. So, and this goes to responsible journalism as well, because that was what I did before law school. I wrote for a daily. You can't just print out a press release and say, this shop is black owned, when in the letter of the law, it might be black owned by a percentage, but it's not anywhere near 51%. It's black owned in some small measure, but let's not misrepresent the material fact of what's at stake here and what the true ownership interest is. And again,
Right.
Sean's great. Love him. I haven't met him personally, but my people have. I can't wait to meet him. Not
Right.
about him.
Well, I mean, I'll say this as somebody born and raised in Seattle, that is like, man, you know, Sean Kemp had a legacy when he was a player here of being very, very in the community.
Yeah.
You know, him and Gary, you know what I'm saying? Man, those were a lot of pro athletes. We don't see them in the neighborhood, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But when those guys were here, Sean, Gary, Vin Baker, all those guys, you know what I'm saying, they have a history in the community. I think that's why a lot of people in the community really rejoiced when initially, you know, hearing this news. Like, man, this is, you know, somebody who a lot of us, a small kid, you couldn't afford to go to a Sonics game, but you'd meet Sean Kemp over there at Earl's Barbershop, you know what I'm saying? Or, you know, or getting food in the neighborhood and everything else. So it's definitely a lot of respect and love for Sean Kemp, you know, in the community. So, okay. So what I hear you saying on that part is that, you know, the percentage of his ownership, and also the fact that he's not on the license. Now, does a license play into that?
Well, that's the other thing too, is that I understand it still has not officially been granted either, you know, but the whole misconception that went on, and I wrote, you know, the writers from, I think it was USA, Yahoo Sports, and I wrote Seattle Times. I heard nothing back from them about this because, as I said, as members of the fourth estate, we have a duty to get it right. And so if I tell you that the implication was clear, that it was his shop, the way the headlines were written, all of it. It's not his shop. You know, there's nothing new being created. You know, he's not opening per se anything. He's getting onto an existing license that's being transferred because there was insolvency. And again, I'm not here to slam him. I'm here to, congratulate him and to push for more. The fact, like I said, that it took someone of his stature to get that much of a pie. It's that much of a pie. When the rest of us, Breon and other people I know, Aaron at Black Excellence, and I've yet to meet a number of other supremely talented other BIPOC people in this field who I look forward to meeting as well, who were qualified. It wasn't about, as Eisenberg said, it's not just about the lack of money. We discussed this with Aaron on a video I did about a month and a half ago. Sure, the money is a factor when it comes to the agrarian side and the grow side, much more than it is about the retail shops. Believe it or not, Black folks have access to capital. It's the modern era. So we have that, and my people had that. But let's get to the legal part if you're ready to go there. I want to, definitely.
Well, if you could, we don't have a lot of time, but I know that you're in court, and so maybe you can explain to our viewers like what you're in court about with these cannabis cases.
Sure. Let's go first with the racial case. There are two cases. Okay. One of them is with Aaron Barfield and Black Excellence in cannabis. Let's go there first. Those guys had an existing case when I met them, and it's filed out in the District of Columbia, and it's top down because all the way from William Barr all the way down, there's a very intricate federal system here that's at play, okay? And they govern what the state does, because as we know, there's this cleft between the state law, which has cannabis legal recreationally, and the federal law, which doesn't. So that's where Breon Corporate and his people got caught in that cleft, where Jenny Durkin persecuted and prosecuted them. All right. And so, but that's a top-down structure that's coming from the feds. And so Mr. Barfield and his partner, they're busy suing out there, and I'm helping them. This was already going on. The complaint had been filed, but I realized that we had an LCB agent testify. I'm not sure if it was under oath, but at a hearing at the Wildlife and Game Commission, he testified that he knew from firsthand experience that LCB was racist. He saw it in his policy, in their the inaction of their policies and how they treated blacks. He saw it and testified to it. So that in and of itself should be enough to get them through the first legal hurdle of a motion to dismiss their lawsuit. Okay, so that's in as layman terms as I can make it. All right, they are going to move to dismiss it. They already had moved to dismiss it, but I helped them write a request for the judge to take notice of this fact that an internal employee, an agent, testified that they're racist. How many X's and T's and I's do you have to dot and cross to have people understand that you have a valid legal issue based on systemic racism?
Right. And hold on, I want to bring in. Let me see here. Let me bring in. Yeah, I'm gonna bring in Breon here in a second.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring in Aaron.
Aaron, hi, guy.
Because a lot of what we're hearing Christopher talk about is some of the same things that you've been saying, is that, like, man, the system is just systemically, the deck is stacked against you.
Aaron? Can't hear you. Are you muted?
Let's take him. You're on mute. Mute. All right, we're gonna come back to Aaron. We'll circle around, but let me bring in Breon then, because I know that you're working with him on some things right here. All right, and so but Breon, I mean, my understanding is that the way that you outlined your story is like, man, you were in the game early. You got pushed out the game. The industry. You were in the industry early, then you got pushed out the industry, and now you're being blocked from getting back into the industry. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, because first of all, they don't, they don't have any licenses. Like they were supposed to have licenses in October. I was notified that I would be getting a license, right? And then, of course, the Corona stuff hit, and so they gave me the same old rigor well, what's up? You know, and they were like, because of the pandemic, you know, aren't you at work? Yeah. Well, then, whatever. But, you know, they just, like he says, like Aaron says, they keep pushing it back. But, you know, they were supposed to have like 5 licenses available in October, you know, but, you know, then all of a sudden you see Sean Kemp, and he's supposed to be opening up a store, and we had meetings with these guys and all this kind of stuff where they listen to the people speak, and nobody's saying anything about, you know, and this was 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, you know, it's not like this takes like, you know, it's a kind of a lengthy process, like Ian said. And so, you know, but like I said, I was notified that I was going to be getting a store, but there's no application. You know, I go, well, you actually have me, you tell me that, you know, they tell me to go read the 2870 or whatever it is. I go read it. And then I, you know, it says, so you have to fill out the application. So I said, cool, you know, so I'm looking for the application. So I call her back and I go, listen, I just can't seem to find the application. You know, it says you have to fill out the application for this social. She goes, oh, we haven't got that yet. I'm like, what is this? You know, like, why would you have me go through all this and then come back and tell me that there is no application? Like, you probably should have started off with that, you know. But to me, I just think they're toying with us. You know, I think they just, you know, stalling and going to take as much time as possible because they know it's a wealth bidder. You know, when Ian sits there and tries to make all these hurdles and like, you know, it's an impossible deal. He's just, I just, you know, that's a hater, man. You know, I don't think that you should be talking about hurdles when, you know, that's all we face every day in hurdles. And this guy's talking about, you know, like he's trying to discourage you from doing it. You know,
can I hop in, Breon, real quick? Check this out, okay? To your point, as far as the sensitivities regarding this whole issue, other states have recognized it. I met a cannabis lawyer down in San Francisco who's a friend of mine, and he's working on the same thing to make sure that communities have representation when these licenses are granted. It's statutory in some states. I talked to a guy I'm working with on a prison video. He's very familiar with the whole structure out in Massachusetts, and it's factored in the Cannabis Commission. I think one of the people, there's 3 primary commissioners, I think, and one of the 3 is a sister, a brown sister, a BIPOC person, okay? And so that's all very important to know that, again, the law is steeped in practical social realities. They knew what was going on out there, and they took care of it. They didn't do it out here. They left the door wide open to exploitation, and that's exactly what happened to you.
Sure, because
many others.
When I was gonna say, when the feds got me, there was a medical marijuana shop a block from the federal courthouse.
Hello, right. Oh, I can't wait to get to the legal part next. Oh my goodness, I gotta.
All right, you just got it. You just got a few minutes left here in this segment, Chris. So, I mean, what is it about these legal cases that you're pushing that you want the public to know right now?
Well, first of all, you know, we know the examples of Aaron Barfield and those guys have discussed as far as excellence in black cannabis. The most illustrative point I can make is the time when they had their application papers together and they went in there and couldn't get anywhere. But then a white person took the application in to the same reviewer and then boom, approved. They've had other instances where LCB tried to impose a law against them that wasn't even passed yet. So there's that. And so, you know, these are really, really, you know, serious issues on that case. Now, as far as the local case here, where I'm the lead plaintiff, I'm on with John Novak, who is a very seasoned person here in terms of medical side, being an end user on the medical side, a white guy who also believes that LCB is racist and the policies, the method of enforcement has been racist, okay? And what we're alleging in that case is that the Liquor Control Board never actually got authority to act as full peace officers with respect to cannabis. And they've tried a number of times to pass legislation to get it. If anybody wants to Google Senate Bill 1626, or maybe the House Bill 1626, just Google that and take a look. Do a little searching. And there is a a culture of toxicity, by the way, at LCB. Keep in mind that 10 state reps wrote a letter about this culture of toxicity. And it applied to racism, and it applies to unlawful use of authority, which is called ultra vires. It means they're operating beyond what they are legally allowed to do. So you've learned a couple of Latin terms now, and you understand that your common sense is still intact, and you understand that if a person does not have full capacity as a peace officer, there are limitations on what they can do. And this means, or it may mean, as we'll find out in federal court, Judge Richard Jones has this case. We will find out what the limit of their authority is with respect to this. And it's very important because cases may have to be recalled. There are ramifications that are massive.
All right. All right. Chris, thanks for bringing us up to speed on some of the legal cases that you got there, and also, filling us in on the rationale behind your blog post here. The Shawn Kemp Cannabis is not Black owned and does not fix Washington State Liquor Control Board. Thank you for joining us. We're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, it's our last and final segment. What changes need to occur systematically for there to be equal access for Black people in the cannabis industry in Washington State? No time for a sandwich on this break, Mike.
We're right here at East Precinct. It doesn't get any closer than this right now.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. As a small independent media company, we rely on the financial support of individuals and business members to stay on the front lines of the news that's important to you. All right, we are back. We've had some technical difficulties. It looks like the Gremlins are out tonight. So we had Key. She's off, unfortunately. But I know that we'll have to follow up with Key. I want to throw this question out here, and we'll start with Joy, and then we'll go over to Aaron. See, I gave you the heads up, Joy. I'll bring you on here. Let's bring in Joy. Joy, what changes need to occur systematically for there to be equal access for Black people in the cannabis industry in Washington State, in your opinion?
Well, I think we know that the Liquor and Cannabis Board, they were the one who, even though I-502, which is the law that passed in 2012, they were implementing that law. They created a lot of the framework around it. So, we need to see the LCB take some type of leadership level. And they can't just be like, well, hey, the industry's like this. So, hey, cities, you guys figure it out. They need to be a leading point in figuring out, okay, we made some of these laws, we made these decisions. What do we need to do to fix it? And I think the first thing is taking a look at the medical owners that were in the industry before recreational. You saw Breon, you remember Caesar Salad up off 99. There was a whole bunch of different stores that were in city of Seattle that were operating that were, minority owned, that were people of color owned, BIPOC owned. And they weren't able to make that transition to the industry. So we need to figure out, and I don't know if it's a point system, lottery system, not a lottery system, but maybe like a priority system. I don't know what that looks like, but where they can have access to some of those social equity licenses, and also a technical assistance fund. That would be huge for people to access capital. For us, we were able to take my dad's retirement, and we pried it from his hands. Not a lot of people have that opportunity, and he had a city job for a long time, Seattle Parks and Rec. And, we were able to do that. Not a lot of people have access to that. So, a technical assistance fund, also being able to transfer some of those medical patients or medical licenses over as well. And then the other thing too is if the LCB and these cities are really serious about social equity, put their money where their mouth is, create a program, create a position, where it's a team of people that are going to go ahead and research social equity, implement laws, create a pathway for true equitable ownership. Let's not just say, hey, we'll just put out some licenses and you guys figure it out. No, let's really come up with a plan, and these cities have to invest those dollars.
All right. All right. Aaron.
I
there you
agree.
go.
I agree with a lot with like Joyce saying. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? I agree with a lot what Joy was saying, and said like Key and what Key is doing. Like there's no longer a place that you can trust or wait or have good faith in this system to do anything that's right for the community. So at this point, it has to become this innovative space. It has to be the state needs to, give tax dollars back to the community that use tax dollars to destroy, right? Like there should be training programs, 1%, 1% small equity loan or low interest rate loans to any business that anybody who was disparately impacted by the war on drugs should benefit from cannabis tax dollars, because I just think overall state tax dollars, me personally, I say give 100% back to the community. But people say, oh, that's too radical. No, it's not. That's how much damage it caused the community, from education to jailing to gentrification to all these other massive things. But yet the cannabis industry, this little tiny thing, exclude Amazon, exclude Microsoft, exclude Boeing, who did also help the Black community. Why is cannabis being held responsible, for social equity? So I say give 100% back to the cannabis tax dollars back to the community, and let that be given to small equity or small interest rate loans to anybody from the disparately impacted community of color to start any small business. I don't care what it is, cleaning. It doesn't have to be even tied to cannabis.
Right. And then it looks like we might still have Ian here. Is Ian there? Let's bring him up. All right, Ian, you're owner. You got 5 stores, 4 in the city, one right outside the city. From your viewpoint, being in this business all these years, what changes need to occur systematically for there to be equal access for Black people in the cannabis industry in Washington State?
What Joy said, she nailed it 100%. Technical assistance and the funding. And I agree with Aaron completely that the funding should not be just limited to cannabis businesses. It should be any business where those groups were harmed in the failed war on drugs. And I think we're going to see a bill this year that kind of takes a step towards that maybe adds 2% or so onto their existing excise tax. And right now in the 2870, I think it created a fund that was originally $100,000. And then Rebecca Saldana took it to $1.1 million. That might be enough for one business, for one social equity business. It's so small, it's kind of inconsequential. It sounds good on paper, but it's totally meaningless. I think there has to be a fund created that, $30, $40, $50 million a year that can fund real businesses. If we're going to right past wrongs, it has to be done monetarily in addition to just conceptually. It has to be dollars and cents behind it.
All right. So we'll do is this. Julie, Mike, it looks like you still have Joy here, you have Mike here, you have Aaron here, and you have Brion. So any questions that you now have? You're on mute. Julie, you have to unmute.
There we go. Okay. So earlier this summer, King County Equity Now released, I think, 8 different cannabis equity demands. And I don't know if we have the slides up that we could get up there, but I wanted to show these real quickly and get your thoughts on this. It sounds like from earlier conversation, there were some structural barriers to some of these. But I did want to hear overall whether or not this is the type of legislation or type of policy practice, whatever it needs to be, innovative community solution that would move cannabis to being a more accessible, equitable industry.
You have to direct your question at a person, Julie.
Let's start with Ian.
The 7 slides. I remember I agreed with most of them, but there were a couple that I think I was supposed to give 30% of my profits to, I think 15% to King County Equity Now and 15% to Northwest Bail Fund. Was that one of those slides? Oh, I remember that they present. There's
I
been
don't
a
think
list
so.
of demands. Can you read what the 7 slides were?
Yeah, I'll pull this up too on mine. So the first was
Yeah,
to
great.
expunge all cannabis-related offenses, including felonies, and release all prisoners. In Washington State, 80% of all cannabis-related arrests ended in felonies for Black men between 90 and 2017. The second was to implement cannabis tax-funded reparations for people who were or are incarcerated for cannabis-related charges and or their children to promote
Great.
generational wealth and educational access. The third is to reallocate the state general fund cannabis tax revenue into an equity fund to help POC folks and communities enter the industry. Legalize home grows for personal use. Redistribute city cannabis tax dollars each year to Black communities. That would have been 1.2 million in 2019. Create 100% Black people of color nominated or elected board or committee to design and implement the city's new social equity retail licenses, assign any upcoming or outstanding city licenses to Black-owned cannabis co-ops, and to donate. And this was the final one, was a call for private owners to donate money towards these efforts to fund a cannabis equity group. And that would really be something that would be on the private sector to participate in and to champion in order to be able to happen.
No, I agree with all of the last two are kind of
Thoughts?
complicated issues that require. I don't think those don't make as much sense to me. You're not going to get Olympia to reallocate the taxes or the city. It probably is a good idea, but I don't know if it's realistic. And I don't think a 100% Black or BIPOC committee to deal with allocating the licenses. It's not up to the city. It's up to the state. The city does.
Yeah, I think the final one is more, is not a legislative one, right? It's asking local cannabis operators to donate to a fund to create a cannabis equity group to do the work that is not currently being funded by the Washington Liquor State Board. Doesn't sound like it's being funded by the state legislature or city on any kind of level. So, and it was something that you brought up earlier too, is something that an advocacy group would be, have a positive impact and be able to provide the type of mentorship to facilitate people into the industry.
Exactly.
Is that something that you would be willing to do?
Yeah, but I'd like to participate in it. I'm not going to. The devil's in the details, right? It's sort of. If you want to get involved, there's one person I could recommend that has her finger on this more than anybody else in the state, and that's Paula Sardinas, who's the. She's on the task force. She's the one that pushed 2870 through. If it wasn't for her, it never would have passed last year. And I think she's the chair of the African American Caucus, caucus in Olympia. I forget the exact term.
Got it. And I guess too, for the other participants, I know I just kind of read it through and those slides weren't very clear on the screen, but I would love to hear from Joy and Aaron too about your thoughts on these. I know this was a few months back, and whether or not there's any new developments.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with like 90% of that. And I think, like Ian said, the devil's in the details, depending on, what you look at. I think what a lot of people are thinking about are the tax dollars. So if people remember, what really saved the LCB was the cannabis tax dollars, because privatization of liquor went into effect. And we saw where the cannabis tax dollars surpassed liquor was back in 2017. Cannabis grew tremendously, taking over like $300-something million in tax revenue. And a large percent of that goes to Medicare in Washington State. Half of it, there's different types of buckets where it goes into. A little bit goes into the general fund. 15 million of it goes to different cities dispersed around the state. So, a lot of people are thinking about, well, we're all, 37% tax, where are these taxes going? And, wanting that to be redistributed to the communities. The other piece is the expunge of records. If you have a nonviolent drug offense, you should not have that on your record. I don't care if it's a misdemeanor, felony, whatever. There's a law that passed in Washington State where it affected 65,000 people who had a misdemeanor on their record. But what we know is that Black people were also targeted and also convicted disproportionately different than, their white counterparts. So they were given out more felonies for the same different crimes, being caught with an ounce of cannabis, they were given a felony and the other one's given a misdemeanor and, some time off. So, thinking about that piece too, believe in home grows, that's huge. And also I think what King County Equity now is just wants some type of representation. I think us as a community, we need our voice at the table. It's hard when people are making laws and legislation for telling us what social equity means for us and they don't look like us. Well, this is what we think you should have. I think the community's tired of that. We don't want to hear that. We want to tell lawmakers, we want a seat at the table, right? We want to participate in that type of processes, that type of distribution of funds to rebuild our community. And that's really, really important. So yeah, there's some stuff, devil's in the details, like Ian said, but primarily for most of it, agree with, about 90% of it.
Thank you. Aaron.
I agree with it all. I feel like there's so many different paths that it has to be a multi-layered system and a multi-layered attack. I think that unfortunately, the industry owners that got in, they probably didn't realize that they were getting into something that was so toxic. So yes, they absolutely do have a responsibility to try to help the community that was harmed by the war on drugs, whether they wanted to or not. I think that at the end of the day, it's about policy out of LCB. The LCB creation is no different than the creation of the DEA, which was created by Harry Anslinger, who lost his job when liquor enforcement prohibition went away. He needed a new enforcement and a way to create income for himself. So he created a drug task force. Well, the DEA was created in '72, but Harry Anslinger created the war on drugs. Started using the words marijuana, and the LCB is no different, where it's still using the same terminology, the same wording, and the same propaganda to keep Black people out through coded language, but yet creating jobs and income for people who are doing absolutely nothing for the industry. They're toxic for the industry and not just the community as a whole. LCB really has no purpose at this point. I believe even through legislation or even through the 502 law that stated that the liquor could not be control of cannabis. I believe that there was another law that they lost, or lawsuit that they lost, that said that they are not supposed to have control of cannabis, but yet and still they somehow have control of cannabis and they get to say who has it. There was a miraculous number of closed liquor stores. I think it was 233 was the original number. It was the same number of retail licenses that was given originally for cannabis. That's not by accident, you guys.
Thanks for that, Aaron. And I know you were kind of breaking up a little bit, but I do have a follow-up question for you. So for the amount of licenses available, is there a limit on the amount of licenses available? If so, how is that number determined? And when you go to apply for your license, who specifically is it that decides whether or not you get that approval?
The social equity task force that's going to be starting tomorrow. I mean, so right now it's worded at 51% ownership of Black male priority gets these social equity licenses. But where are you going to put these social equity licenses? In the majority brown cities, they're still using propaganda that Harry Anslinger created to say reasons why it should not be allowed in their cities. Federal Way, Kent, Renton, Berrien. Our Renton's opened up, but Berrien, Des Moines, they're not allowing cannabis stores, and they're using old Harry Anslinger propaganda as the reasons why they shouldn't be open. Oh, we're worried about the kids and the community and violence, and none of that. We've already proven that none of that exists. But the major issue is that those are majority brown areas now, not in the existing old Seattle that was gentrified, right? So you have 52 licenses or 32 licenses available for retail ownership only. If, as we were speaking earlier, those licenses are not allowed to be vertically integrated, they're set up to fail because they don't have the branding capacity, they don't have the capital capacity, so on and so forth, that then some larger corporation comes in to take over. If you look at the operating agreements in LA and their social equity program, Angela Ryan and her boyfriend are down there stealing people's social equity license. Through the social equity licenses, they're stealing people's licenses.
Thank you.
Let me hop back in here. We're up against it, but we're gonna be on time. So we'll go one time here around the horn, and ask people what do you want people viewing this show right now to know or do? What's the one next best step? What do you want people to know? Whether it's, I don't know, visit your site, support an organization, lobby a council member or a legislator. What is it that people should be doing? How about, can we start with you, Joy? Are you cool with that? We're gonna start with you because you had a Converse sweatshirt. you, you know what I'm saying? Hey, salute.
Thank you. I supporting independent media because I love watching your show and all you guys, and really appreciate what you guys are doing for the community. Always watching. But what I'd like people to take away from this conversation, and just in general, because we see a massive shift in our Black community where we're starting to really focus on what it's going to take to build up our community. And the one thing that I could ask for this would be, like, we can all agree to disagree, but we can't disconnect. That's like the biggest thing. We see a lot of disconnection out here. We see a lot of canceling of people. We see a lot of, friction sometimes. We got to come back, especially with the cannabis social equity thing. We all got to come back at the table, have a unified voice, a unified vision, so we can really, really make some progress forward. That's what's going to continue to focus. If you're out there trying to get into the cannabis industry, stay tuned, because the Social Equity Task Force is going to be coming out with information. City of Seattle, you can follow, the Black Cannabis Commission, and you can also check in with Paula Sardines. She's on the commission. She's one of the commissioner for the African American Affairs. If you just look her up, you can shoot her an email and get more information.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate you, and thank you for your support of independent media.
Love y'all.
That goes a long ways. Thank you. Let's see here. Brion, we got a short time span here, man. So we got to condense it. What is it that you want people who are viewing to do?
I have a call to action. All right.
Okay.
And I want people, first of all, to call the city mayor, her mayor powers or whatever she has, to grant and all the African Americans that she, and the systemic racist system that she attacked and denied the opportunity that she afforded the other 3,000 white-owned marijuana stores in Washington. Her telephone number is 206-6844-4000. And then you can take a little bit above her and call the governor and let him know that he needs to intervene and allow African Americans at 502 rec weed stores. The state worked with the feds after selling us licenses to put us out of business. The feds, that's Jenny Durkin, the Seattle mayor. And also, they need to call the mayor, the governor, and let them know that, we know that they worked with the state and the feds to put us out. His telephone number is 1-360-902-4111. And let them know that we know, the games they've been playing, and that they need to act now and get us our stores and, stop all this bullshit of messing around.
All right, man. My mama gonna be, she gonna get on my head. Thank you, bro. All right, let's go up here to Ike.
One takeaway: go to lcb.gov. Sign up for their newsletters, the social equity newsletters. They publish, all the meetings are public. You can stream them. I think it's going to be really interesting, and get your information firsthand as opposed to third or fifth hand.
All right. And AB, let's see if we got a connection for you here. What do you want people to do?
Man, get politically activated in a digital way. If you can't make it to Olympia by foot and by social because of COVID, but get on that, get active, and figure out who your state rep is. Bang them in the head about what they need to do for social equity, because it's starting and ending on the state level. There's some things that we can do on the city level by pushing, like Seattle, Tacoma, and Everett, cities that allow cannabis to start allowing maybe shared worker spaces or spaces just to create cooperative workspaces in that can be just cannabis spaces in general. I don't know. I mean, you got to press on a political level, though. It's not any other way. It's got to be done in Olympia. You got to be done through email campaigns. You got to get on top of your rep. You got to call. You got to make the numbers. You got to tell them what to do.
All right, so there it is. So what we'll do here is, man.
Starbucks talking about it.
All right, let me bring everybody in here so we can say thank you. We're actually getting out of here on time, which is great. And oh, see, we're zoomed in a lot. I see you there. This is for all you other guests. That's the proper way to come onto the Converge platform next time. You know, and by the way, you can get merchandise whereweconverge.com, and that's where the merchandise is at. For all of our guests that joined us here, for Brion, for Christopher, for Key Porter, who unfortunately fell off, Aaron Bossett, Ian Eisenberg, and on behalf of Mike Davis of the South Seattle Emerald and Julie C., want to thank everybody for joining us. And can we all agree to meet up again real soon? Like, we see where it's at. This task force is getting ready to meet. Maybe we can gather again in maybe a month and see like what the progress is. Because this is a story everybody here has said we need to stay on top of. So let's stay on top of it.
Yeah, without a doubt.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Peace.
We're right here at East Precinct. It doesn't get any closer than this right now.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. As a small independent media company, we rely on the financial support of individuals and business members to stay on the front lines of the news that's important to you.